All right, so welcome to episode 3 in the XJ Build series. Thank you so much for tuning in. I couldn't be more excited that you're here, wanting to see what I'm up to. It really means a lot to me. Anyways, so in this video, we're going to be tackling a number of things that have been on my list for quite a while now. These are things that are definitely big upgrades that'll make driving this Jeep XJ so much more enjoyable. So I went ahead and I made a list of things. Hopefully we can get to most of them, but as any project goes, you know, some things will take a couple hours, might take a week. It's all up in the air until you get into it. So I'll show you what my list looks like. Also, the point of these XJ Build Series videos is to get to what I'm calling version 1.0 of my Jeep XJ, which is that first version that I envisioned several years ago when I first purchased it. So if you want to see kind of the progression of how the Jeep has been from the beginning until now, I would definitely check out the Instagram and the previous videos up to this point. Anyways, let me show you what the list looks like and then we'll get into the repairs. All right, so here's the to-do list that I've put together. If you know anything about Jeep XJs with the 4.0, you know that when you're out cruising around on a hot summer day at low RPMs, that they just want to overheat. They get hot. These engine compartments just weren't designed with adequate airflow at low RPMs. So what we're going to do first is we're going to install a new all aluminum radiator with the triple electric fans. So I bought this radiator setup off of Amazon. It has pretty good reviews. One of the big things that I'm most excited about is that it has a higher pressure rated cap. So the factory one is 16 PSI and the one that it came with is a 19 PSI. So that should help keep those engine coolant temps down, keep that boiling point low. So when you're out cruising around at low speeds, it'll perform a lot better. There's also a number of other things here on this list that I want to get to, but we'll explain those as we get to them. First up, we're going to replace this radiator and see how it all turns out. All right, so I got the old radiator out. Wasn't too bad, pretty quick. and I've started to get all the stuff put on the new radiator, get everything prepped and ready to go in. It's all turning out pretty good. So as you can see here, I got the transmission cooler line fittings put in. I've Teflon taped all of the fittings here on the radiator so they don't leak. Over here is where my temperature sensor is on the cold side of the radiator. So this is a 180 Fahrenheit on switch and a 165 off switch. So when the radiator on this side gets to 180, the fans will kick on. I decided to put the sensor here. This is where the petcock valve was. I didn't like the way that was, so I decided to put my temperature sensor there. All right, so it's the next day. We're going to keep working on the radiator. I had to stop yesterday and run to Ace Hardware for some bolts, as well as I needed some time to figure out what I'm going to do with the triple radiator fans. I decided I'm going to have to hold off on installing the triple radiator fans till I can sort out how I want to do the wiring. Also, this is my daily, so I need to be able to get to work tomorrow. So we'll get that radiator put in and then reinstall the old clutch fan and auxiliary fan. All right, so this is the wiring that came with the new triple radiator fans. So this wiring is not up to the standard that I like to install stuff. This gauge of wiring doesn't seem adequate enough for installing these fans. So I'm going to have to do some deciding on how exactly I want to run these fans. Pretty much the way I envision it running is the temperature sensor that I have installed over here will ground the circuit, turn the fans on as needed once it hits the correct temperature. But I also want to be able to flip a switch inside and have all three fans come on at the same time if I want to just run the fans on at all times. So I need to draw up some wiring diagrams and really come up with a good design. That way everything works smoothly. All right, so this isn't a DIY channel, but here's a little PSA on this Amazon radiator. So I've been scrolling through all of the reviews on this radiator, and there's several different options of what I could do here. But one of them had some really good information. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I ran into and why installing this Amazon radiator isn't just an easy one-day job. So one thing to note right off the bat is the transmission cooler lines that are integrated into the radiator. So the fittings that you get with this radiator aren't correct. The barb that comes off the bottom here from the one from the Amazon radiator is actually larger than the factory one. So you want to swap the old one from your old radiator to the new one. So I would swap both the fittings like I did here. Something else that I noticed while installing this radiator is there's a little bit of a gap on the bottom when you get it installed. So I went to Ace Hardware and I bought some rubber grommets. These grommets I actually had to cut with a razor blade just to make them look the way they do, but I think they'll do well taking up the space that's on the bottom. All right, so another issue that I ran into is how the radiator mounts to the condenser. So the condenser has two holes on both sides. Let's see if I can get a good angle here. So it has two holes on both sides and they don't line up at all. I don't know if the tab on the radiator was welded off from where it should be or what happened here, but I've tried sliding the condenser over, but the AC lines hit the housing here for the headlight. So yeah, I can't really slide that over any more than it already is. So what I've decided to do is these little brackets on the AC condenser can be removed. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, remove the rivnets that I put in there, and weld some bolts from the other side so they'll be studs. But that should take up the space and make it so this thing mounts in there good. One other thing to know is these studs aren't quite long enough when you have the aluminum radiator triple fan installed. So you do need to trim the bushings. I took about an 1/8 inch off the bottom with a razor blade, and once I did that, everything fit perfectly. All right, so one last thing with this aluminum radiator. So this is the cross member that covers the top of the radiator. So this new radiator cap is closer and larger than the factory one. So what needs to happen is you need to trim the cross member so it'll fit. So you can see here, I marked it out already. That's where I'm going to be cutting. I also noticed that this lip along the bottom here touches the triple radiator fan shroud. So I'm going to go ahead and trim all along the edge there to have adequate clearance for the new fan shroud. It doesn't say anything about this in the Amazon description. It just says it fits, it goes right in, but that's definitely not the case. Anyways, here's a little PSA on all the little things that I've found along the way while installing this radiator. So let's get after it and let's make the required modifications. To show you how the radiator is turning out so far. So I got the condenser mounts all modified. So I ended up just welding the holes closed, drilling new holes, and then welding bolts through it, and then attaching a nut on top. I did need to use a couple washers as a spacer on the underside here between the condenser mount and the top of the radiator, but 3 washers was plenty of space. Turned out really nice. Painted the brackets and everything. So now I'm just ready to put the cross member in and start final assembling everything. But yeah, turned out really great. So just another PSA. So now that I got the auxiliary fan and the mechanical fan back installed with the aluminum radiator, I wanted to go over what I had to do in order to get all that stuff installed. Like I said, ordering this aluminum radiator from Amazon has definitely been a larger project than I thought it was going to be. Required tons of modifications to make this work. As far as the modifications for the auxiliary fan and the mechanical fan, all I had to do was I had to oblong the holes that mount the fan and the shroud to the cross member. That way the bolts could go in straight. Other than that, they went in just fine. They don't touch the radiator. So if you are going to be using the factory stuff, not the triple fans, it should all go back together pretty easily. So I forgot to mention what coolant I'm using. So I'm using water wetter along with some Prestone Max concentrate and some distilled water. I'm trying to get that coolant boiling point down as low as I possibly can. So those are the products that I'm using. You'll see here that I'm starting to bleed the coolant system and getting all that added to it. Alright, so I finished getting the radiator all installed. Unfortunately, I had to reinstall the mechanical fan and the auxiliary fan. We'll get the triple electric fan installed later this week. I just need to sort out the wiring and decide exactly how I want it all to be ran. Other than that, I just finished getting the coolant all bled, and I'm ready to head out and go on a test drive. So we'll see you in a couple days when I start working on the electric fans. All right, so here we are. I finally got all the parts. It took about a week to get all the wiring parts that I needed for the electric fan setup. I also took my time and really thought through the wiring diagram. I drew it up, so I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. I also got the Jeep all prepped and ready to go. So we're going to get right into getting this wiring all situated. And I think first we're going to start with installing the switch. So let's get into it. All right, so to quickly go over everything that I'm going to be using for the electric fan wiring. So here's the factory wiring that came with the radiator from Amazon. I just don't like how this is. There isn't any terminal ends to plug into the fans or connector ends. It just is not well thought out. So we're going to ditch this and we'll move right into what I've planned for this. So I went ahead and I bought a waterproof relay from Painless Wiring off Amazon. Looks really good. It's going to be great. Came with terminals. I also bought some battery terminal posts or bus posts. I'm going to use the positive one only for getting the power to the fans. I think I already showed you guys the switch, but here it is again. It'll fit right in. I already have a spot for it inside the Jeep. Yeah, so we'll get that installed as well. I also have miscellaneous stuff here. I've done a lot of wiring in the past, so I have a pretty good idea what I need. Got some loom, got fuses. I have all the terminal ends and everything that I'm going to be using, as well as some heat shrink, inline fuse. I also picked this up from Harbor Freight, a bunch of wiring. So we'll get right into it. It should all turn out pretty good. I'm not really going to have a walkthrough of exactly how I'm setting this all up, but I'll show you the wiring diagram so you can kind of see how I did it. And then if you're interested, you can plan your setup accordingly. All right, so here's the wiring diagram that I came up with. I'm not going to go over everything here, but if you're interested in using this for yourself, here it is. I'll leave it up on the screen for a couple seconds here so you can screenshot it. But this is how I'm going to be setting it up. Exactly where the wires are going to run, I'm not 100% sure on that yet, but we'll run them in a nice way once we get everything in the Jeep.
All right, so I got the most difficult part of this wiring process finished. I got the fan switch installed in the vehicle. It's right next to my locker switches. Everything works. It illuminates when you turn the lights on. The only thing that's not going to happen, so when you turn the fans on, the icon for the fans is supposed to light up red. But the way my circuit is set up, that won't work because the switch just activates a ground. There's not power and ground at it. So that's unfortunate, but it'll all work how it should, and the fans will come on.
All right, as I was going through all the footage of episode 3, I realized that I was missing a bunch of footage of the wiring once it was all complete. So I want to show you how I ended up doing the wiring, what I came up with, also where I got my ignition power, and some other things that I didn't clarify in the wiring diagram that I had drew up earlier. So I want to show you how that all turned out. So the wiring for the electric fans turned out really nice. I really like how I ended up running it. So to start on the driver's side here, this is where the wiring comes through the firewall. So I have a power and a ground that come through the firewall here, and those run up and over the top here, and they go into the relay. So here's the waterproof relay that I showed previously in the video. Then from there, the wiring goes to the fans. And instead of using the bus junction, I ended up just creating a splice point that's in the loom here. So it goes from a heavier gauged wire to 2 wires, which then run into these waterproof connectors that I have here. I bought these connectors off Amazon. I really like how they turned out. I wanted everything to be waterproof. Don't want any corrosion in anything. So from there, I built a harness that goes into the electric fans. So you can see here one of the connectors. So the 2 fans on the passenger side, those are activated by the switch and the temperature switch. The one on the far left driver's side, that is the auxiliary fan. So there is a way to wire that to the switch. I haven't decided if I want to do that yet, but for now, it just acts like a normal auxiliary fan, which comes on when you turn the AC on or the defrost. So all of that stuff is working great. I couldn't be more happy of how this all turned out. All right, so under the dash here on the driver's side, I want to show you where I ended up getting my ignition source. So there is a blank fuse spot that is labeled ignition. I don't know what that's typically used for, but I checked it with the voltmeter, key on and key off, and found that that is a power on when the key's on, and then it turns off when the key is off. So that turned out really nice. All right, so that's going to be the end of episode 3 in the XJ build series. I really wanted to get a lot more done in this episode, but replacing the electric fans and the radiator and doing the wiring and all the custom brackets, all that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. I did not realize that that Amazon radiator is not just a easy plug and play installation. But anyways, thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Don't forget to do all the cool YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, turn on those notifications. If you have any suggestions, anything that you think that I could do to improve my YouTube videos, make them a better viewing experience, let me know down in the comments. I'm trying to make these videos as best I can and have a good high quality video that you can learn something, that you can be inspired, that you can have the desire to go out there in your garage and work on your Jeep or your projects. Anyways, thank you so much again for tuning in. Get out there on the trails, be safe, and I'll see you next time.